time. It's our time, my friends. Time for millions of maturepreneurs, 55 plus, who are hashtag not done by a long shot, to revolutionize how we lead, do business, and innovate our world. I'm your host, Jeanette Anderson, and welcome to my conversations with fascinating people who would rather inspire than retire. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Maturepreneur podcast. I am your hostess with the mostest, Jeanette Anderson, and today I have with me a really fascinating and interesting man who I met through happenstance and circumstance somewhere along the way on LinkedIn or something, and we've kind of adopted each other. Because I just love his sexy brain and how he thinks and what he's up to in the world. So I'm glad you're here, Michael. Welcome.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
And you're calling in all the way from where?
I'm in Thornhill, Ontario, which is about a 5-minute skateboard ride from Toronto proper.
Okay. And he would know that because he is a skateboarder, which is just, you can't use that now on your what I wouldn't know about you. So,
most people would know that about me, though. So.
Okay, there you go. So I'll tell you, as always, folks, the formal introduction, then we'll find out something about him that you wouldn't guess. We'll launch into our topic today, which is really about many entrepreneurs over 50 feel like they're late to the game and might feel left behind with technology trends or momentum. And so we'll be talking about how to reframe that fear as something else entirely, alignment. So we're going to have an interesting conversation around ageism, how to hunt it, and how to rethink about what's happening for you and what's coming next. So here's the official skinny on Michael. What if to thine own self be true isn't a moral ideal, but a practical skill most of us were never taught? See, told you he makes you think. Many people spend decades doing what works, what's expected, or what keeps the lights on, only to they later realize that success without alignment feels strangely hollow. If you're putting your hand up and you can relate, then this is for you. This conversation explores why reflection isn't navel-gazing, but a serious tool for clarity, direction, and better decisions, especially in the second half of life. The question isn't how to move faster, but how to move true. Because being behind may simply mean that you're finally ready to listen. Oh, love it. So let's start with a basic. Okay, so you were born in Leeds, England, but you don't have any English accent because you moved here early in like 72 and to Canada. What prompted that move from England to here?
Well, it wasn't me,
yeah,
as Shaggy would say. No, that was my father. He had made a connection. He had done a sabbatical at the University of Buffalo, and he wound up meeting people at the University of Western Ontario. Now, my father was an oral surgeon, so he wound up getting a job at the dental department at the University of Western Ontario, and we came with him.
Okay.
And so it's been 54 years here in Canada. I still have family in England, but yes, I am born in England. What can I say?
Cool. All right. So tell us a little bit about your journey from, skateboarding enthusiast at 8 to music and skateboarding book and magazine to what you're doing now with Bridgeway. Just giving us an idea of kind of what the journey has been for you.
Well, it's not been what you would call a normal journey. Looking back on these last, 40 years of work, I have to say that for me, it's always been about being authentic. And this is a hard thing for a lot of people to grasp, but I love skateboarding so much that I wound up creating a website back in 1995, early 96. That turned into a book, which turned into a magazine, a TV show, 2 feature films, and it was amazing. It was a wild ride. And then at the end of it, in 2018, I wound up working at a funeral home for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I'm kind of going through all this, as I explained, I'm thinking to myself, God, if I was looking at me trying to say, does this guy make any sense? If it makes no sense to you, believe me, it made no sense to me. And so I've written a number of books. Some have done well, like the Concrete Wave book sold over 40,000 copies. Other books I've published for other people. So I love publishing. I love ideas. But ultimately what it boiled down to is really what exactly is my journey been about? And that is where things get interesting, because I realized that all of the work that I had done, all the failures, I've been fired from a number of jobs, in sales, I didn't perform well. I could never understand why I could not sell well. And I guess where I'm going with all this is that all the failures, all the successes, it all culminated in this really strange thing, which was, why can none of these amazing tests like Myers-Briggs, Colby, or Clifton Strengths, why can't they find me? Why can't they identify me? Because I don't fit any of these weird buckets. And that's what's led to me, it ultimately to this idea of, I've got to find a tool that will find people like me. And in doing that, it's opened up a whole can of worms, because there are a lot of people out there that think they know themselves, but ultimately they don't really know themselves. And I've had that now for decades. It stopped, thank God, but it's taken its toll. I'm like on the Colonel Sanders plan. I've got hopefully a few more decades, but the secret sauce for the Colonel didn't happen until he was in his mid-60s.
Exactly. Well, okay, so why were you doing that introspection? Why were you taking all of those tests? What prompted that? What prompted that desire to know yourself better?
I can tell you what it was, is that I've always believed that as long as I believed in the product, I could sell it. And I did okay, a little bit here, a little bit there. I had my own business. I ran a magazine on skateboarding, and it did really well relative to other publications. It did fine. But I could never get into my mind where things were starting to kind of disintegrate. So I thought, well, maybe it's just, I have a gregarious personality and I've got this winning formula. And then things start to kind of like the ground shift. And in my mind, I kept thinking, well, on paper, I should be good in sales. Where's it disconnecting? And that's when the penny started to drop. And I realized that what I'm about ain't sales. It's much deeper. And that's okay, because we need salespeople. But I don't operate at that level. I operate at a very different level. I ask of systems, why is the system operating the way it is? Why are people behaving the way they are? And I'm not a psychologist. I've never taken a psychology degree in my life. But I'll be honest with you, the failure and the second guessing led to me start to think, there must be a solution to this. And that's when I started working with AI about 9 months ago. And I started to realize I can use this tool to ask myself these questions. And once I did that, as I said, the can and the worms all started to, meet each other.
All right. So you went through a number of careers and the Concrete Wave success with the movies and so forth, and some that didn't work, the sales. If there were a through thread, is that a word? A through thread, or a thread that runs through all of those seemingly disparate kinds of jobs, what would that be? What do you think your purpose or your why is? What is the thing that's pushed you or pulled you your whole life?
So I've thought about this quite a lot, especially in the last 9 months. I'm one of these people that can see patterns and I can see systems. So I'll give you an example. Ageism, right? Everyone talks about ageism. And my thought process initially was, well, if we can get people to work together and we can try this, we can try that. And I thought about almost this makes sense. And then I started to peel back the onion and I started to realize maybe ageism is a byproduct of a system. Maybe if we start to ask the questions around ageism or toxic workplaces, in which I've experienced, maybe there's more to what I'm feeling. And that's really where the architecture of this comes in. And without getting too deep into the weeds, basically what I discovered was a lady by the name of Danella Meadows. And she's a systems thinker. And what this lady built with her incredible mind is literally 12 different levels in which change takes place. And at the top level, which is level 1, which is paradigm shifting, which is when Luke is in the StarCraft, or you want to call it, when he's in the final phase of that whole place where he's got to blow up the Death Star, he takes off the computer and he just uses the Force, right? There's a paradigm shift. He's gone from, I don't know what I'm doing here, to I'm now a Jedi Knight. So if that makes sense, what I basically tell you is level 12 is the lowest in terms of change taking place. So we count numbers, what's our KPI? How many salespeople do we have? How much volume are we putting through? So from those stages, from stage 12, numbers, all the way to, absolutely mind-blowing paradigm shifts, most people operate, and it's great, it's what they do, but most systems, people in those systems are operating at a level of 12, 11, and 10. And without, again, going too much into this, my mind, because it's twisted somehow, has been operating at a level 3, 2, or 1, which means I am questioning things beyond any reasonable human would do. But it forced me to analyze, why is it I've never been understood? I've never figured it out. And so no therapy did this for me. No test could do it. I had to build it myself. And that's the difference. And that's the honest truth. It's just, I have this compulsion, this compelling need to know what's causing the source, what's driving people to be upset, what's driving the prejudice, if you will, when it comes to things like ageism. And this is serious, I know it sounds almost like this is a weird thing that happened, but that's what's been driving me ever since I had my first memory, which was 1969. I was 5 years old. And I'm watching a man landing on the moon, and I'm thinking, what exactly am I seeing here, And that's how far back I go.
Okay. All right. So what I heard is some of what you do in that. So pattern recognition is a skill or an ability or an innate talent, wherever you want to attribute it, and a fascination with systems thinking. But why? What's your why? Why do you care about that? What does it do for you so you recognized early you were a pattern recognizer and you thought differently. You have a different way brains work. But why do you care? Why do you care about systems? Why do you care about what drives results?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because that is the question that plagued me for 55 years. And the reason I care so much is that my inner working. So you know how we talk about body, your sort of how you do things with your hands or with your feet, with your mind? That's one thing. The other side, of course, is how you think. So it's like, that's your brain. Well, I developed a tool that measured one other thing that most tools in HR and certainly most tools out there don't measure. And that is your soul, your why, the passion, the intangible. And so what my tool does in the best way possible is it isolates your mind, it isolates your body, but it also isolates your soul. And that's your why. It's what drives you, and what drives me is, well, I call it circles. Circles equal soul. So I have on my test of 20, so you can have someone with a triangle mind, as I call them. They may have 11 or 12 triangles, so it's a very high mind, clarity-driven person. You might have someone who has 10 or 12 squares who are very much focused on building things, and they're very much structured. Well, I have 20 circles. How do I know this? Because the test that I developed measures body, mind, and soul, or mind, body, and soul. Or in my case, I still have an ability to think, I have an ability to build things, but I am somebody who feels deep resonance in my entire existence. And I guess I would say this much. I am someone who generates gravity around ideas. I attract people through resonance. I don't build things that are efficient. I concentrate on what is true. What this means is that I'm hugely into emotional coherence. I understand things like grief, ageism, but what I'm truly at my core is a field generator. And the upside is yeah, I've lived a pretty interesting life. The downside is that I overextend. I launch multiple things at once. I launched a peace movement and I wound up in 30 countries with this peace movement. We gave away $300,000 worth of product, but
Wow.
there wasn't a board meeting. There was no executive. There was no charter. It wasn't even a nonprofit. It was just an idea. And so when you're wired like I am, with what I call 20 circles, you have an ability to see things and feel things. And at the core of it, at the soul level, is that you're so top heavy on it. I can't not be this. And that's what I've developed. I've developed a language of why. And I hope I haven't put the cart too far above the horse, but what I'm saying is that most people can't articulate. If they are driven by the mind, they can articulate it. If they're driven by their body, they sometimes can articulate it. The people that have high soul energy, the biggest issue maybe is people don't measure that so much, you know? And I like to tell people, I want to take them from, you know, woo-woo to wow. And we'll get into it because I want to talk about your report. But ultimately, you asked me what my why is. My why is, why ask why? why, you know, it's like it's the stuff that's underneath. That's what I'm concerned about. That's what drives me. And I hope that explains it.
It certainly does in terms of your kind of framing and terminology. The way I look at our why is I call it the intersection between what we're healing from our past and what we long for the future for ourselves and others. And it's not what we do. It's not even how we do it. It's why we care about that. And what I heard in what you were saying is that even when you were young, part of the challenge you felt is not understood, not fitting in. You thought differently. You were probably a kid who asked why a whole lot and drove your mom and dad crazy, I'm sure. But that not understanding and needing to understand why things were the way they were, what was creating the results and the outcome. Often when that happens when we're younger, we are trying to understand, we're trying to survive. In my case, a very chaotic childhood and violence and so forth. I had to understand what was happening with these people so that I could manage the situation, the people, etc., even at 5 and 6, for survival's sake. And part of that turned into my why of I wanted to you and every other person I meet to get that you matter and live like you do, because it's what I always longed for. I longed to be put on the list. I longed to be to matter enough to my mom beyond the addictions and the men and so forth and so on. And so that's what I see in others, is that longing. That's what I hear. That's my note in the choir, I call it. And so I certainly think that there's probably components of why you care so deeply about this is that as someone who thinks differently, you often aren't understood, often aren't part of, so ostracized or on the outside looking in. So you've created a tool to support people as part of your journey, to support people in being deeply understood so that they're not feeling like they're on the outside, or that they're weird, or that they don't belong, or that they are unfathomable or just can't do it. Just really to understand who they are so that they feel seen, feel valued.
That is 100% correct. That's absolutely why I built it. And I couldn't have built it had I not gone through all of the stuff that I went through, which is the greatest irony of all. Those people that are successful, that are making millions of dollars and doing the greatest thing in the world for themselves and their families, kudos to them.
Yeah.
I want to talk to people who feel trapped. I want to talk to people who are scared. I want to talk to people who are uncomfortable, because I lived that for 5 decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And frankly, right, these days, I'd say that's almost 100% of the population. And if they're not feeling uncomfortable, scared, and at loose ends, probably just not paying attention so to what's going on inside them and outside of them in the world. So I skipped over the point, and people will, be annoyed if you skip something you say you were going to do. Tell us something about you we wouldn't guess, that we wouldn't know, or maybe even your friends don't know. What's something about Michael that people would not guess by looking at you or your website? Or
Well, I've thought about this question because I listen to your podcast. So I'm going to tell you something that no one knows about me.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of the Carpenters.
Okay. There you go.
Now that's a big deal because I grew up on punk rock. Okay, and I listen to heavy amounts of punk and ska and reggae. But you have to understand, Karen Carpenter was a drummer, and I was a drummer. And Karen Carpenter, her voice is so perfect. There was no auto-tunes in 1975, right?
Yeah.
Or 72.
Yeah.
So, I don't cry very much, and so I'm not gonna cry now. But I'll tell you right now, when I hear a Karen Carpenter song and she's singing, I tell you, that just affects me in a way I can't even begin to tell you. Now, I also, I've interviewed heavy duty people like, the guy that was the lead singer for Slayer. So I can listen to heavy metal. But yeah, I've now disclosed on record, it's public, I like.
I love it. And you're right. Probably wouldn't have guessed that. So just very quickly, tell me why the fascination with skateboarding. Where did that come from, and why did it become such a passion for you?
Yeah. So that's really simple. Skateboarding is one of those things. In 1975, I tried to skateboard. I thought I was going to fall off of it. I didn't. And that's when I said, wow, this is perfect. It's immediate freedom. With snowboarding or skiing or anything to do with surfing or going to the mountains, you need to kind of plan, unless you have the fortitude to save a whole bunch of money and then go live in a place that has snow and mountains and, knock yourself out or surf. But most people live in urban cities. And so my point is, it's immediate joy. I have over 15 skateboards. My collection at one point was 60, but I'm now down to 15. So where I'm going with this is that I just open up the door and I go. It's immediate freedom. And it's also about balance. And I've often said there's a really interesting feeling of being on something that if you go too much to the left, you wind up in a circle. And if you go too much to the right, you wind up in a circle. So my brain for the last 51 years has been a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. And that's the only way forward. So my kids skate. When we go to the skate park, there are a lot of people, because I have my helmet on, so you can't see the gray hair. So people kind of look at me and they kind of go, is this like a friend of the family? Like, who is this guy relative to two kids? But all I will say is that it's something I never let go of. And I appreciate it. I worked in it. I know a lot of people in it still. And it's probably, in terms of return on investment, and I'm nothing against hockey or football or baseball, but this is just something you can do with friends, alone. It's just joyful. That's all I can say. It's been a mental health tool. It's been a physical experience that has transcended my soul. It's just amazing.
I love it. And I bet you would surprise people when you take off your helmet and they kind of go, hey, wait a minute, that's not the typical skateboarder. And so how about, what was one of the biggest lessons that you learned from working in the funeral or the death care industry?
I've often said that you get a profound appreciation for life being surrounded by death. Mm-hmm. I think most people would say, it makes sense to me. I went to 750 funerals plus, and I was there during COVID. So I saw things you probably wouldn't even see in a Hallmark movie. I saw things and experienced things that, for what it's worth, I don't know how to explain it, but everybody thinks death is one of those taboo topics and grief is really difficult. But where I've always sort of felt is that just being present, just showing up, is sometimes the kindest thing you can do. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about asking questions. Don't worry about saying the right thing. Just being present. And if anybody takes anything away from this conversation, I would just say, I know it's tough for you to do that for a friend or a family member, but I saw it time and time again. Just that moment, that reaching out and saying, I'm here, can make all the difference in the world. And I want to say something else about this. You'd be amazed at how many families, once someone has died, the outpouring of emotion and the outpouring of grief and all this amazing stories about that person, that is wonderful. And then a week or two or a month or half a year will go by, and that person who experienced all that support, it somehow collapsed. Mm-hmm. So over the next 30 years, as the baby boom decides to check out, and I'm at the tail end of this. It's 1964. So the first one turned 80 this year.
Mm-hmm.
And in the next 10 years, there's going to be an onslaught of death and dying. And the funeral homes are going to be challenged, there's no doubt. But all I will say is we as a society are going to be challenged because there won't be any wiggle room. There's going to be so many people dying as a result of this big baby boom coming through. And you've probably seen the numbers just as I have. And I think all I can ask for people is to just be present. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about saying anything. Just show up, and show up after, and you'll find that makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. And presence makes a big difference. It doesn't have to be fixing. Fixing is often the last thing people want or need. Yeah. And the thing that I do, if it's someone that's close to me or that I know well, is I will put a note in my calendar for 6 months later to send them a card, because typically I find most grieving doesn't happen for about 6 months. Anywhere from 5 to 8 months in that window is when all of the estate's been dealt with and all of the people have gone and now they're on their own, and when the real grieving sets in. And so that's a time to really show up as well. So I will give them a call or talk to them and so on. They may not even know that they're grieving. They'll just be processing emotions and not connected. But that's often when that hits a lot of people. So great point. Show up, kind of like everything in life. When we show up and we're present and we're fully available and willing, it helps. It makes a difference. So tell me about your transition in terms of becoming an entrepreneur, because for quite a while you were an employee and then you became an entrepreneur. So had to sell your own products and services. How was that for you?
So I want to maybe back up for 1 second and say something about being an entrepreneur. I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. I mean, I happened to run this little skateboarding website called the Skate Geezer homepage. My brother Andrew built it. I was the one who conceived of it. And that was in 1995 or 96. And at the time, I was selling photocopiers for this very large photocopy company. And I was trying to sell them to publishers. And you have to understand, I was 32 years old. I wasn't succeeding very well. I mean, I was the worst on the team. And yet, I stumbled into this publisher's office. This guy his name is Nick Pitt. And I tried to sell him this massive photocopier or whatever I was trying to do. And, he was like, he didn't want anything to do with it. And somehow the conversation turned to websites. And I said to him, have you guys got a website? And he said, well, no, we don't. I said, well, I have a website. He goes, you have a website? I said, yeah, I have a website. He goes, what's your website on? I said, it's on skateboarding. And the guy looked at the website. We found it. There was no Google at the time. And why I'm sharing this all with you is that one sentence changed the entire trajectory of my life. He goes, you have a website on this. This is really interesting. We're thinking about doing a book on skateboarding.
Oh.
And so I went out and I wrote this book. And as I said, I had some success with it. And then after I'd finished it, I thought, well, what do I do next? My wife was at the gym. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I guess I'll do a magazine. So that was it. I phoned somebody up who I knew could lay out magazines, a guy called Tom Brown. And we created this magazine called International Longboarder. I was a terrible salesperson. I mean, you have to understand, 80% of the sales come from 20% of the salespeople.
Yeah.
I'm in the 80% of the salespeople that made 20% of the sales. And I wear this as a badge of honor, because just because you have a gregarious and outgoing personality, and just because you're good with people, does not mean you're going to be great in sales.
Yes.
And what happened was I did this magazine, and unfortunately, for a couple of years it went well, and then I realized I wanted to go on my own. So I went on my own, and I did that for a year, still being employed, selling advertising. And I was terrible at that. I was working at a travel magazine, trying to sell advertising. And by the time October 2003 rolled around, I got to a situation where my boss kind of said, are you working on this magazine while you're working on our magazine? Because that was a tell. And also I just lost the plot. I said to myself, I'm having so much fun working for myself. But it took from literally 1996 to 2003, it took 7 years to turn it from a job hobby to a real jobby, to really, integrating it. And it kept a family of, there were 5 of us. It kept us going for many years. And the magazine. the magazine did well.
And the book. Yep.
Yes. Most entrepreneurs who run a business like I'm doing, the revenue is anywhere from 200,000, 300,000. Some people do much lower, some people do much higher. But I was a one-person operation, and I had a designer named Markintosh who designed it. I had a printer in the United States. I was in multiple countries. And I mean, at the height of it was almost $500,000 a year, which is pretty good for, 2000s and stuff. And, the internet was changing the world. But I did DVDs, I did books, I did magazines, and I was a one-man show, and I loved it. And then, Jeanette, I hit what I call writer's block. But it actually wasn't writer's block. It was another type of block, which is someone of my energy and I guess mindset was like, oh, well, we did the Gandhi thing, didn't we? First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, and then they fight you, and then you win. Well, skateboarding was my passion, but changing the face of skateboarding was really my goal. And I was one of the architects. I'm not the architect. And I feel this in my bones that after the success hit, the industry didn't really need concrete wave. It had its own way of telling the stories through different medium. The internet had exploded, YouTube had exploded. But back in the day, back in 1999, people didn't know about longboarding. They didn't know that women could be part of it. They didn't know that different people of color could be part of it. They just didn't know what was available. And I gave them that insight, and it ran for, almost 20 plus years. And then I realized, that's not writer's block. That's a vision block. Your vision has been fulfilled, and I sold it, and
right.
And I got into a whole other field, which was funeral services, which is crazy.
See, that makes perfect sense to me. But so you were kind of an accidental entrepreneur, which a lot of us are. We back into our businesses through passion or interests, and often can face into them by finding passion, interests, things that we love to do, and or problems we love to solve in the world, and then create a business around that and get paid for it, which is pretty much how I've done my life and my business most of the time. I've reinvented my business in the marketing realm 4 times. One of them was into an event planning company, and that came about because I got laid off of a job in Toronto when I lived in Toronto, middle executive role, and they got rid of all of their middle management layer. And now I'm at loose ends in Toronto, which is a fairly expensive city, trying to figure out what I was going to do. So I saw an ad, literally saw a little ad in the paper that was a call for artists to create a miniature golf hole for this installation that Hazelton Lanes was doing there. And I thought, oh, well, okay, I'll do that. And so I created this miniature golf hole that kind of consumed me for about 2 months. I got, they gave us, I think, $1,000 towards whatever we needed. I got tons of donations. All my friends from work volunteered, etc. And I created this huge, it was a celebration of Canada's 125th birthday. And it ended up winning best hole. So one of my unique distinctions is I have an award for having the best hole. And I then finished this, and so won that. That was great. And now what? And so I finished this, and I had all of this paraphernalia, and it was kind of like, well, what do I do with this? I live in a 2-bedroom apartment. I don't have a place to store this. I had movable beaver tails, and I had flags from every province and territory. And you took a tour around Canada, and you went through a big giant birthday cake at the end into the hole. And so you went past, lobster traps and skis and snowshoes and all sorts of stuff. So I now had this hole, and I was like, what do I do? So I phoned up some malls and said, hey, Father's Day is coming up. Would you like to buy my hole? And because it could be turned into 3 miniature golf, and we can have a little putting thing in your mall. One came back and said, no, we don't want your hole, but we do want you to come in and talk to us about artist decorated Christmas trees. So I went in and talked to Sherway Gardens, and that became the beginning of launching my event business. I went back to them and said, no, you don't want that. There's 7 artist decorated Christmas trees events that happen around Toronto area. What you want is a giant gingerbread house contest, because there wasn't anyone doing that. I ended up creating the largest gingerbread house contest in the world that I could find.
Wow.
We at its end had over 300 entries from professional chefs down to little kids. It was really cool. That led to me owning 2 farmers markets, which also doesn't happen very often. But I backed into that business by virtue of necessity and ingenuity. It was kind of like, well, what do I have that I can sell? Oh, I have all this. Okay, now how do I do that? And created an event planning firm that I ran for the better part of 2-3 years there, and then moved back to Calgary. So all that to say, accidental entrepreneurship can be a great way to discover your path and your purpose, or at least your current path and expression of what you love. It's been an iterative process for me of reinventing about 4 times in terms of my business alone, consulting to event planning to training and teaching, etc., and now coaching and consulting, all within marketing strategy and sales. So the point I'm very laboriously trying to make is figure out what you enjoy doing. See whether or not that is something that you can actually sell to someone, and then create, as Michael says, a field around it, create a vision for it, and then go and sell the vision, enroll people in that vision. And that can turn into a business. It's probably the fastest and best way that I know for people to monetize some of who they are and what they want to do and create and contribute in the world. So your vision has shifted now to the Bridgeways magazine and to talking about ageism amongst other topics. So you went through that process of who am I now? What is really my unique way of being in the world, and how do I want to contribute that through your process? That led you to creating this app, this tool that allows people to go deeper in understanding themselves. And so now that's your primary business, right?
That's correct. But I do want to say something, and that is the one thing this tool that I discovered, and I'm now sharing with the world, is that once you kind of know your passion, your why, where your head is at, or where your heart is at, or where your body is at, what you will find is you can't be great in all 3. Right. Meaning, if you have clarity of mind and you're able to do strategic thinking, fantastic. If you have the ability to build things and you're able to work with structures and you're all about that, terrific. And if you're all about the soul and in terms of the why and the expression of passion, terrific. But if you think about it, you need to have other people to help with your geometry. So it's really great to be a solopreneur. But what I discovered was that my Achilles heel is operations. My Achilles heel is clarity. I have all this passion. I have all this ability to see things. But unless I have someone to actually build a website, to actually build what's needed to make it work, I'm dead in the water. And the same thing with keeping things on track. So my only advice is, yes, know yourself, but in knowing yourself, know what you cannot do and outsource correctly. And that's what I've done, thank God, with the Inside Atlas, is that I've outsourced the 1 or 2 things that I can't do. And it's made all the difference.
So tell us a little bit about that, about hiring your COO, because operations is not your jam. So you decided to hire someone and bring them in. For a lot of entrepreneurs, that's scary on a bunch of fronts. 1, loss of control. 2, the cost and the investment in that. 3, but it's my vision, my baby, I don't want to let it go. C, control issues, and a variety of other different reasons why people don't do that. They suck at asking for support is generally one of the bigger ones. How did you wrap your brain around that, and how did you find the person that was the good balance for you?
That, again, is an excellent question. And the answer is as follows. I created the product. I created the test, the reflection tool, whatever you want to call it. I was fooling around with this thing, and I sent it to a friend of mine who I met actually because I write for this publication, funny enough, about death and dying. It's the Canadian Funeral News. And through a set of circumstances, a gentleman by the name of Greg Barnsdale introduced me to this lady, Sally Swanberg Wallace. And just as a happenstance, I said, hey, Sally, try this thing. I'm not sure what you think about it, but for me, it's been pretty interesting. And it was one of those weird things. Sally tried it, and she's like, wow, this is wild. And I said, yeah, it is kind of cool, isn't it? And we started talking, and that's when I realized not only would I be comfortable for her being involved with this, I realized it was necessary. Otherwise, I felt that it would be dead in the water. And Sally has been instrumental in getting the website done, in working with the AI, in ensuring that everything that I couldn't do correctly has been done correctly. And so to your point, I know giving up control, and I know the idea of, well, this is my baby. My point to anybody listening is 50% of businesses that start up die within the first year. And I have written about this, and I am determined to help people. And so if it's a question of you give up some control, but at the same time your baby lives, what do you want? Because 50% of the people listening to this go, I want to start my own thing, and I can do it all by myself. It's like, yeah, great, start, but be aware. You're going to run into a territory in which you have a 50% chance of failure. And that's not cool.
Yeah, exactly. Both from a skills and ability point of view, but also just a balance, energetic balance as well. And functionally, there needs to be 3 legs on the stool. Michael Gerber talks about it in his book, The E-Myth, of the visionary person who sees the big picture and so forth and pulls people towards finding and creating that solution. The technician, the person who does the thing, the cabinet builder who makes the cabinets, and the operational person, the person who creates everything else other than building the cabinets that allows the cabinet builder to build the cabinets. And if you don't have all 3 legs, then the stool tips over. So and very few people in the world, A, are all 3, or B, like doing all 3. So it's really smart to have done that and brought that person in, and really recognizing the limitation. But also, I suspect for many people, the desire. There's a loneliness epidemic that's going on in our world right now. I still think it's the trail of COVID and the fact that we forgot how to people. We forgot how to human being with one another. And so that loneliness epidemic certainly impacts older people and solopreneurs and people who are working on their own. So it's great to bring in support in the form of a partner or a subcontractor or a coach or therapist or someone that you're working with, a collective of people that are working together. There's so many ways to do that so that you're not alone in that. It's a lot of work and a scary proposition to be alone in trying to bring a vision to life and all of the components of it.
Absolutely. And I would say that it's not only strengthened the business, but it's one of these things where Sally's husband, Bill, was supremely important in building this with us. And again, I keep going back to this thing that it's the smallest things, like I was writing a book. That's what led to this whole thing starting, And I think to your point about, hey, you created this golf hole, and it's sometimes the smallest things that capture us. And instead of just sort of, saying, well, whatever, I encourage people to kind of go, wait a second, that had an effect. That's the pulse. And when Sally wrote me back and said, wow, this is amazing, she could have just ignored the email. And a lot of people that I know have ignored my emails on this. But, what can I say? You've taken the Insight Atlas. Let me ask you a question. What did you think? I think I sent you the first 10 maybe questions.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful reflection tool, like you said, because even in the writing of the answers or the answering the test, there's insights. But then you also get that framed back to you in a way that's quite supportive and I would say illuminating, reinforcing for those who have done some of the inner work, reinforcing and validating of what you already knew or know about yourself, but also shines a light on some of the areas that you might not be aware of. I particularly like the components that say, and here's, not the right phrasing, but here's where this could go off the rails. Here's the shadow side of that strength. And here's some things that you can do about that. So that part of it, I really enjoy as well, because I love not just having the positives. I often tell AI not to blow sunshine up my skirt, to just be very critical and give me real kind of critical answers or thought-provoking answers, but also solutions. How do I strengthen that side of me? So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was an interesting approach to, like you said, the personality tests that I've taken. Give you feedback, give you input, help us put ourselves into boxes, which we do love sometimes, but it also doesn't take into account some of those deeper drivers. So
Yeah, that's the soul component.
yeah,
That's circle energy, and that's something that's missing in Kolbe. It's missing in Clifton Strengths, and it's missing in Myers-Briggs. And the reason why it's missing is because people like me, generally, the system doesn't know how to deal with someone like me, and that's why I built this. So I basically feel if I hadn't have built this, I'm not sure what I would be doing. And that's the weirdest thing of all, is that I built it. It's now to the world, and it remains to be seen exactly what happens. But of the 250 people that have probably tried it, only a handful have said, meh. Most people are like crying. And I didn't build it to make people cry. I built it because, as you said, it's a reflection tool and it can clarify things. And that's the greatest thing I think I can offer the world, which is if you have clarity on a decision that you have to make, well, then you're going to make a good decision, aren't you? Right. You're not going to be, the decision to have Sally be the chief executive officer was a huge decision for me, but it was the right decision. And I made it with such clarity that it was a no-brainer.
yeah, because we understand more of who we are and what matters to us. So just tell people define the tool. Tell them what it is. So
the Insight Atlas is a reflection tool, and depending on which one you take, for example, the Quick Pulse, there's 10 questions, and it measures how you act under pressure. You are forced, by way of the way we've created it, to answer what resonates first with you. So ultimately, what it boils down to is this tool will figure out in a beautiful way whether you are leading with your mind, whether you're leading with your soul, or with your body. And there's no right or wrong answers. I want to repeat that. There's no right or wrong answers. We need all types of people in the world. In fact, people who are high triangle, you need them to do certain things. People who are high square and high circle, same thing. And we have people that are a combination of all three elements. I call those people hexagons, and they're bridges. And each of these people, whether they're circle, square, triangle, or hexagon energy, what they can do as a result of knowing this geometry is that they can then plug it into additional components. So, for example, we took your career test, reflection tool, and I plugged it into those 18 questions that were about risk, reward, and reflection. And when you combine these different surveys, what happens is you get an absolutely crystal clear picture of what you should do. And this, to me, is the insight that is the most valuable, because invariably it's a problem at work, it's a problem in a relationship, it's a decision that you're hoping is the right one. And it's funny, there's a philosopher that most will know called Aristotle, and his number of his ideas have been out there for a long time, but I'd never heard of this. It's called phronesis, and it's the wisest decision you can make given the circumstances you find yourself in. And so phronesis is one element of the Insight Atlas.
I love reading that, and I didn't know what the word meant either until I read your magazine and had to go look it up. I really enjoy things that make me go to the dictionary.
Oh, good.
Because then I'm learning. And the notion of phronesis is really interesting, because it really is about, we tend to, as human beings, I think, make the best choice that we can at any given time, given what we know, what we understand in that moment, unless we've got, some wires that are loose. But basically, it really does make sense. And speaking of Aristotle, and you mentioned vanilla earlier, and the systems thinking part of your brain. So talk just a little bit about Bridgeways and what you want to accomplish with that, the magazine.
So Bridgewave is a culmination of what I feel is a number of years of publishing ideas. And so it is a systems thinking approach to three critical ideas. One is ageism, the other is office toxicity, and the final one is burnout. And so these three huge topics are our main drivers of why we put Bridgewave out there. I had Concrete Wave. I had a book called The Endless Wave, which is about death. So I figured Bridgewave is the perfect answer to the final chapter of my life. So the next 30 years, I hope, we will put together every issue will look at ageism. It will look at worker burnout and toxic environments, and we will sort of inject a systems lens approach. And what I mean by that is we're going to look at Danilo Meadows' stages. We're going to incorporate Joanna Macy, who is all about the heart, and she looks at what's the emotional cost of what the system is doing to people. And finally, we've got Eleanor Ostrom, who was the first woman to ever win a Nobel Prize in economics. And she's all about the commons. She's all about what are the agreements that keeps this system in place. Fascinating woman. And finally, phronesis through Aristotle, what's the wisest decision we can make? And so what happens is the Insight Atlas is the entry, so people know their geometry. The I call it four-wheel drive of Aristotle, Meadows, Macy, and Ostrom. I call it ammo. So once you have your ammo and your Insight Atlas, then when we look at problems like ageism, when we look at situations like office toxicity and obviously worker burnout, we then have a framework. We can talk in a way that people go, okay, we're trying to fix a level 3 problem with a level 12 solution. More posters is not going to fix ageism. What's going to fix ageism is when people understand that the mechanisms that are in place right now are ensuring that ageism keeps going in our office. Oh, never thought of it that way. Yeah, if you put your AI machine on any resume that shows any inkling of somebody born, after a certain year, you've now built a system that weeds out before it can even start. So it's getting people to think of ageism, for example, the way we think of smoking, right, on an airplane. How did that happen? Well, it started because stewardesses, as they were called back then, flight attendants, complained. And people started to think this is not really cool. And once the cost of not doing it versus the cost of doing it, once those things start to, compete with each other, we're looking at the cost of ageism now. It's $900 million per 8-hour shift. That's what it costs in North America. About $100 million from Canada and $800 million from the United States. So when you frame ageism as a $800 million per day cost, then people kind of go, oh, what system is reinforcing that? So Bridgewave is a fun journal because we have lots of pictures and stuff in it, but it's a fun way, as far as I'm concerned, to teach and to explain what are truly difficult problems. And we will also incorporate things that are not ageism, burnout, and toxicity. For example, the latest issue we have about, why do people in Colombia not wear helmets, so especially babies, right? So we've got all these systems approaches through these wonderful thinkers.
Right. And all 4 of your ammo people are dead, right? No, one is
they are dead. Aristotle is still dead as far as I'm concerned.
So, and the other 3 ladies are dead. So what you bring is they're a distillation of, based on their body of work, what they would weigh in on in this, what kind of perspective. You bring their lens to the question.
Right, but not to get too academic, because you have to understand, I didn't get past grade 9 math, and I did very badly in physics because I never took it, and I did even worse in chemistry and biology. So I am somebody that has to drill down to the very basics. That is to say, you don't need to know how, like, Isaac Newton thinks to ride a bike. You certainly don't need to understand Danilo Meadows or Joanna Macy to understand what it feels like when someone doesn't return a phone call and you've had that job because you have that experience and you're being completely shut out because your resume was flagged because you're over 45 or 50. Yeah. You know how it feels. You don't have to explain it. You just feel it. And that's the critical thing. That's the insight. I want people to take these 4 thinkers. If they want to go down the rabbit hole with them, be my guest. But you don't need to know them. We've built it in automatically. And the tool that I've built on top of the Insight Atlas is something called Coach in Your Pocket, which is literally a tool. And if people want to email me once they've done their assessment, I'm happy to share it with them, because it literally will talk you through based on your geometry. And that's something that no coach can do currently in AI. It's not customized. If you put in your report, it will talk to you as it's talking to your report. So Michael and Jeanette have very different feedback when it comes to Coach in Your Pocket, which I think is kind of a cool thing.
It is. I can hear all the coaches out there going, no, don't put me out of business. But I think...
No, I'm not going to put them out of business. But I will tell you this. at $200, $300 an hour, some coaches, I mean, they've got amazing talents, but not everybody can afford them.
Yep,
And,
absolutely.
and the truth is that we still need people, right?
Yes, we do. Well, and
yeah.
What I say to people who have that reaction around AI of, oh, it's going to put me out of work and so forth, is it'll put people who don't know how to use AI out of work. But those who actually do know how to use it and apply it and use it as a leveraging tool that it can be, hopefully for good, because it can be leveraging tool for good and bad, will advance. And I literally worked on a book, started out as a few templates and turned into a mini book of AI tools that support people in figuring out how to do their marketing in a way that's so much easier than and how to really understand themselves and their voice in the marketplace. So I think it can be a great tool, and it will never replace love. And that's what I think as a coach, I define my job as I get paid to love people in ways that they need to be loved, ways and areas of their life that they need to be loved. So who they want to be, holding a space for that, for them to step into that kind of intentionality, plus intuition, plus skills and knowledge, is something that a human coach brings that AI currently can't. AI can bring wisdom. It's a great tool for reflection. I use it and have been using it for personal development. But there's nothing quite like getting a hug from a human being when you're struggling with who you are and your shadow and so forth. So
yeah,
it won't replace us. It will certainly make our lives easier, and it'll replace a lot of coaches, but it won't replace everyone.
No, and that's the critical thing. I tell anybody who will listen to me, look, I floundered for 50 years plus. I really didn't know what the hell was going on. AI opened up the door, and now what I basically think is that once you know your geometry, once you understand what's happening and you look at the system differently, you can still use AI, but humans are the one that's going to fix problems like ageism. Humans are going to have to fix toxic work cultures. Humans have to fix burnout. AI will guide, but ultimately it's the human that will be developing what changes come. That's exactly that's the key thing.
Well, and it's the humans that create the issues in the first place.
Exactly.
So yes. All right. So tell people you have a gift for them. Speaking of your tool, so tell them a little bit about the assessment that's on your website, the Quick Pulse.
The Quick Pulse. So the Quick Pulse is 10 questions. It won't take you more than 2 or 3 minutes to answer. You're going to get a survey back, response back rather, from the survey. And what I would like to offer is, for the first 50 listeners, if you send me that PDF, I'll run it through a little different AI. The one we have the website is a nice version, but I have a little bit more customized one. And so I will offer what is essentially a much larger, much more in-depth report. And I think people will enjoy this. I think hopefully it'll blow a few minds. And as I said, this has a value of about $247. So I think people will really get a kick out of it. And there's another free survey that we offer because we wanted people to trust us. There's no credit card needed. I've done all these really weird surveys, and then at the end of the day, before you give your credit card, you just Google what's this company like, and all of a sudden you hear all these scams. So I just said to myself, no email required. This is your survey results, end of story. So where I'm going with this is that there's also a survey on relationships, and so they're both free, and I'm happy to let people try them, and of course, with the Quick Pulse, if they would like a more in-depth piece, I'm happy to provide that.
So that will be in the vault. For those of you who know about our vault, that's our guide to all of the gifts that all of our speakers have provided. You can also go directly to Michael's website if you'd like to go directly for that, called the InsideAtlas.com, the Inside Atlas, ATLAS.com. And that's where you can find out more about the tools, what the work is that Michael's doing. Is Bridgewave on there as well?
Yes, Bridgewave is on there. And we recommend, if anybody feels that Bridgewave is kind of a cool thing, they want to get involved with it, I'm happy to accept contributions. We're looking, at all kinds of issues beyond ageism, toxic workplaces, and burnout. But if you've got something that aligns with systems thinking, if you've been involved with something, you kind of go, you know what? I think I know where this is going. Send me an email if it leads to something. Who knows?
Yes.
But I welcome contributions, and I just want to say that I can't stop publishing. So I figured, it's a compulsion.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
thank you for mentioning the magazine.
Well, and I love that your frame of reference is the next 30 years. I'm going to be working on this for the next 30 years. And it's true that many of us don't, certainly retirement is an old and outdated notion that no longer is applicable to about 80% of the population. There is about 20%, give or take, that actually are fully retired and want to be and are happy to be and so forth. But many people are working full-time, part-time on legacy projects, on nonprofits, on building empires, publishing projects, all sorts of things, because we have to financially or because we choose to in order to contribute and stay vital and healthy, or both. And so many of us will be working for another 10, 20, 30 years. So I like that your frame of reference is 30 more years at the helm. And lots could be changed and done and accomplished in that time as well. So thank you so much for being here and for your passion and for really diving deep into answering a question about how come people don't get me? How come I'm not understood? How come I don't fit in those boxes? It's led to a brilliant tool that can support a lot of other people who may not feel understood, seen, valued, appreciated for who they really are, or know where to go next, because that's a big question that's going on right now is what's next, or now what? Now that I'm not the CEO, who am I? Now that I'm not the whatever I've been my whole life, now what? So I love that through serendipity, accidentalism, intuition, taking action, you have created this path for you that has deepened your exploration of humanity and of now systems, especially, and how it impacts us, and brought you to this point of really contributing a beautiful way for people to get clear about who they really are at our core. So I'm glad that you went on the circuitous path you went on, because it created all of this capacity that's amazing. So thank you for that. What's one last?
Thank you. I mean, what can I say? Thank you for having me, and I so appreciate your thoughts on this. And look, this is the first major media interview I've done, and I'm delighted to be part of your world, your Maturepreneur world. And if I can support your efforts, you got a fan here in Toronto.
I love it. I love that I get to meet such amazing people through this journey and this process for our American friends. I can never remember which one is which, but I am bilingual. So for those of you who have appreciated this, by all means, go and grab the tool, connect with Michael further, get the Bridgewave magazine, take a look at it. We'll have an episode or an issue coming out about ageism in March, so you want to definitely grab that. Go back to the archives if you're listening to this after that. And by all means, please do share this podcast episode and our podcast in general with other people who may be looking to find ways to answer the question, now what? This podcast is for those who are too inspired to retire. So there are many of us out there. Please share this, please subscribe, and leave your comments on how we can make this even better for you. Oh, on that note, we are going to be changing the podcast format coming up soon, something that's more succinct, rapid paced, and we'll try that and see whether or not it serves you, because I know an hour is a lot of your time. So we want to make sure that we give you lots of value with a slightly different format. So watch for that coming out in March. All right, my friends, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. And thank you for being here, Michael. What's one last piece of advice you'd like to give people about being their true selves as they move forward?
I think the best advice I can give is that when you know who you are, why you are, how you are, what you are, then ultimately you know where you fit in this world. And for decades, I've never felt that I fit.
Mm.
I never really understood it. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. When you know yourself and you know what your skills are, life becomes amazing. And I have to say this, and I know people will be listening, but the amount of things that I've done in the last 9 months to build this tool, if people knew, it's hours and hours of self-discovery. And yet, all I can tell you is that there's a lightness now. If you'd met me 15 years ago, I probably would be the same person, but I wouldn't have the same insights. Mm. And that's why I called it the Inside Atlas, not the Insight Atlas, because inside yourself is this map, and you need some guidance, and we all do. So, yeah, when you take the time to reflect, you then can make really good decisions. And that's what it's all about.
Love it. Thank you. I won't say anything after that mic drop other than thank you for listening and tuning in. And please do share this episode. It's got lots of great wisdom nuggets. Thanks for being here, Michael. We'll see you all soon on the Maturepreneur podcast. Bye for now. Thank you for listening. I'd love it if you left a comment and subscribed. And I encourage you to apply one aha from this interview right away so you can turn your wisdom into wealth and your contribution into positive change. Bye for now.